Dr. Turnell, thank you very much for your time. It's a great honor to have you on our program. By looking into improving the economy, so it's by lifting up poverty, it would lead towards peace for the country.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that not all conflict, of course, is economic based, but an awful lot of it is. And so sometimes you have the veneer of religious conflict or ideological conflict, but you go one step below that, and it very often is a fight over resources, a fight over economics. And I think that's highly relevant when we look at Rakhine State, because again, the complexities come in. Rakhine is very, very poor. Most people in Rakhine are poor. And so the real thing to do is to try and aim at real solutions. How can we help the people of Rakhine? What can we do in really fundamental ways to bring about the end to violence, the end to conflict?
What sort of real efforts do you see with regard to bringing back the displaced and getting them resettled?
Well, I think bringing people back remains the absolute objective of the civilian government. It was central to the Kofi Annan report, but they're trying to do it properly. They want to try and make sure that the situation is such that people can safely return. The worst thing in the world you could do would be to bring people back prematurely into a situation that could just expose them to more violence. So getting it right is the critical thing. And it seems to me, again, that the senior ministers and the senior people within the civilian government, that's what they're trying to do. But there are many forces against them. All over the place, both within this country and outside. Many people who gained from the initial violence, of course, will gain from continuing violence. So, the risks are all over the place. But it seems to me this is why that a very careful approach to bringing people back is exactly what's needed. And I think that's the approach being undertaken.
So can you talk about how the economy can be improved in Rakhine State?
The first thing to say is I think that the economy in Rakhine State, and indeed the whole country, was left in a dreadful state when the NLD came to office in March 2016. But open in various ways to these various crony cohorts. But for the average person, they had no power at all. They had very often great difficulty in earning a living. So apart from just getting the economy back to growing, the biggest objective of the government was to try and transform that political economy, give opportunities not just to the cronies but to other people. So open up the markets, expand access to credit, expand access to international trade, try to bring the average person of Myanmar, people with ideas, particularly young people with ideas and energy, trying to allow them to get the opportunities that they need and deserve. This is why some of these actors, I think we really need to investigate and need just to think about how a lot of these vested interests are behind a lot of the pushback against the reforms and behind a lot of the violence that I think in their minds might be useful in pushing back against the objectives of the government in trying to make a more open economy to the average person.
Yeah, the pushback, I guess you're saying not only the Rakhine, but also perhaps the ethnic problem as well, isn't it?
There's just a broad struggle in Myanmar across the board. And in that way, Myanmar resembles many other countries, making this very, very difficult transition, again, for 5-6 decades, into something else. You'll always confront vested interests. It's a long, difficult struggle in which profound institutional change is required. So it's a big struggle. And it's going to make a lot of enemies along the way. It's going to make, I think, the bulk of people much better off, but at the same time there are going to be a small cohort of people who benefited under the old regimes who are going to be discomforted, and they're not slow in demonstrating that and their unhappiness and then acting on that to push back, as I say, against the reforms.
There are also observations that talk about the way it is moving forward, and some people are saying that they are actually surprised by the advance and the development. Is that true in your observation?
Again, I think the narrative that has been established is one of economic underperformance, and I think much of the press reportage, but you look at the numbers, and in fact, it's not true. So right at this point, for instance, Myanmar is the second fastest growing economy in Asia. And given that Asia is far and away the fastest growing region of the world, Myanmar is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In fact, it's in the top 10 of fast-growing economies. So, there's been extraordinary progress to that end, but again, as I mentioned earlier, extraordinary progress in structural reform, trying to open up the different markets, trying to expand access, because in the end, that's what it's really about, allowing people access to improve their own circumstances. That's really the major goal of economic reform, not only in Myanmar, but everywhere where it's attempted.
Yeah. And I think I really want to end my interview on that very high positive note. So, Dr. Sean Turnell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.